Now with 2026 upon us, I'm going to explain to you why, if you've got an extra few dollars burning a hole in your pocket, why the 296 Ferrari is the car you need to buy. Let's get into it now. Now that we're flipping the calendar to 2026, and there's a whole pile of different supercars out there on the market today, it begs the question, why this? Why the Ferrari 296? Lambo has a great car, so does McLaren, so does Aston Martin. Why would you buy this car? Well, I'm here to talk about that. The Ferrari 296 didn't go over with a bang. I mean, a lot of people saw it when it came out right after the Ferrari F8 Tributo. It was a hard act to follow. Along came the 296, and a lot of people weren't all that excited. New series of controls, haptics and capacitive controls, hybrid drivetrain, V6. There was all sorts of reasons why those loyal Ferrari enthusiasts didn't want this. But guess what? There was a new brand of buyers coming behind the wings. A lot of people that saw this car for what it is, an absolute performance monster. And that's why that leads us to the conversation of why I truly believe the 296 is likely the car you're going to want to buy. Take a closer look, and I'm going to explain to you, and it'll become very, very clear. First of all, after the Ferrari F8 Tributo left, they had a twin turbo V8, a very great car, had put down immense amounts of performance, and everybody wondered how could they beat that? Well, with the 296, they did. From a performance perspective, they did. From a sound perspective, they did. And the 296 actually offers another level of versatility that you could only dream of in previous Ferraris. But then you start to think, okay, the F8 went bye-bye, went the V8, adios. And then why would you buy this when you could buy a Lamborghini? Well, when this car came out back in 2022, you've got to think of what their competition was. Well, they had not quite released yet the Revuelto by Lamborghini, which was the Aventador replacement. That was promising to be a hybrid as well as this was. Plus it was the Aventador replacement, and it was a scale up. You would expect it to be 50, 60, 80% more than the base trim Huracan. Well, the Huracan Technica, that's all they had, and it was already long in the tooth with about 10 years under the belt, and it was getting a little blah. Now granted, the Technica, still that V10 engine creates some of the best sounds in the industry, bar none. And it's definitely one of Lamborghini's pressure points to actually buy. It's a hard car to dispute. But it was a little old, and if you're shopping for something new and fresh, a lot of people just skipped on the Technica. If you wanted it at all, a lot of people just went with the Evo. But that took us to the next conversation. Skip on that. The Aventador was a little old, and you knew you were going to wait for Lamborghini to come up with some kind of V12. So they weren't really in the game yet. Then we think about McLaren. Well, they had the Artura, which was also a twin turbo V6, also had a hybrid drive, but it had all kinds of reliability problems. It clearly wasn't the same caliber of this car, down maybe 100 horsepower. Price was down a little less too. It looked more value point, but it definitely didn't have the durability behind the Ferrari, which feels more like mass production car in terms of its overall quality and the way it operates. The McLaren just had too many bugs. And of course, McLaren, with some of its reliability issues, definitely does pose a challenge. Not to mention, a lot of cities do not have McLaren support centers. I think here in the prairies, in Canada, you've got to go all the way to the coast. It's a 12-hour drive to your nearest McLaren dealer. So that is another showstopper when Ferrari has more outlets. That's another impact. Now, Lamborghini does as well, but then that brings you to other brands. Brands like Aston Martin. Not quite in the same level, not quite in the same league, as are the AMG cars and many of those other supercars that are coming from more of the traditional brands. So really, what else was there? This really was, in that price point, really the only car to have. It was better than the McLaren from my own personal take. It drove better. The integration between the hybrid drive and the V6 and the engine was much smoother and easier transition. And again, Lamborghini just didn't have anything that works. Okay, so what's changed? Now all of a sudden the Technica's moved on. Lamborghini now has a new car called the Temerario, which is a twin turbo V8, and it's also a hybrid. The Revuelto's shown up now. It's a hybrid with a V12, and many would argue that's the car to have because it's got a V12, the big doors, and a hybrid drivetrain. They've also improved and utilized the dual clutch gearbox and gone away with their single automated roboticized unit. But where does that place this? Why is this still the car to have when Lamborghini's released two great models? The Ferrari 296 is more than just a sum of its parts. There's a lot that goes into this car, and there's a lot more history waiting in the wings, and I'm going to explain some of that. But when you even compare it to its bigger brother, the SF90, you're seeing the depreciation hit that car even harder. Why? Because once this car came out, the 296, most would argue, yeah, it was down about 200 ponies from its big brother. But the SF90 had all-wheel drive, and it just didn't feel quite as dialed in as the 296. And every single reviewer that got their hands on both cars found that the 296 was far more engaging, far more exciting, and certainly equally as fast, at least at a passing acceleration race. The 296 is clearly a performance beast, and certainly punching way above its weight class. And the heart of every Ferrari is ultimately its drivetrain. And when the F8 Tributo left, many just scowled and scoffed and said, hey, what is Ferrari up to? Well, this is what they're up to. This here is the heart. 2.9 liter V6 twin turbo, 120-degree displacement with a hot V and 2 turbos up the middle. Of course, you've got a dual clutch gearbox in between and an electric drive back here. Now, collectively, the total horsepower output between the electric motor and the engine are up at 829 horsepower. Clearly no deficiency in terms of power and performance. But as you look down here, it also has an improved soundtrack. That's right, the 296 is a better sounding car than the F8 Tributo, as well as the 488 before it, and on top of it, it sounds even better than the SF90. That's right, the V8 Ferraris don't sound as good as a V6. And that is a controversial topic because there's a lot of lovers of the V8 Ferraris. They are classic, almost like the V12s are the classic Ferraris, and you just can't critique those engines because they're a literal level of perfection that all other manufacturers could only dream to strive for. And some say the styling is a little bit subdued, a little relaxed, but the more you look at it, the more you realize it's actually got a significant level of aggression. It does come, in fact, from a 250 LM. Of course, you think about the race car from many moons ago. If you look at some of the styling cues, particularly this back section right here, definitely has that 250 LM design. But as you look up at the front here, it has some other nice shark look here. Okay, you don't get the beautiful S-duct that you find in the F8 or certainly in the 488 Pista, but in fact, you do get that sharp nose. And that sharp nose is an absolute glorious piece. Some people say it looks like a shark, some people say it looks like a fish, but at the end of the day, I believe it looks extremely classy and on top of it, very contemporary. Now, of course, with the new design language for Ferrari, things have changed up yet once again. But this is one of those spaces that I truly believe it's slotted in there. Because if you look at this car, the SF90, truly is an element of beauty that they pass through. See, because the SF90 was based on largely the older platform, the 458, the 488, and then of course the SF90, they all look very similar. And this takes some skins from the book of Ferrari SF90. So the looks of this still has a little bit of that previous generation, but it doesn't do with what we're starting to see this new design language in some of the newer cars with the black strip across the front. Some love it, some don't. The new V12 cars, of course, even the new Testarossa has that, 849 has that black strip, and as well as the F80. So there's a lot of Ferrari design language in these new designs and these new platforms that not everybody's loving. Not everybody loves this car either, and certainly from a design perspective, it is a little bit softer and more subdued. That being said, it is very curvaceous, and when you really get to look at this car in certain lights, it is absolutely gorgeous. Again, when you see it in person, I truly don't believe pictures do it justice. It's an absolute magnificent design from what I can see that Ferrari's done on this. Now, instead of also having, you know, what we saw on the F8, where they ran the glass right from the roof all the way to the back, they've changed that. They've gone with this flying buttresses that drop off here and give it sort of that attack mode even when it's sitting still. It sort of has that fastback look to it. A very good looking car indeed. And some, again, some love it, some not as much. But one thing you can't deny is the good looking glass that they've sculpted on the back. Now, this is glass. If you update and you go with the set of Fiorano, you can get yourself a set of plastic glass essentially. But it's a gorgeous design and certainly one that looks very well sculpted. Now, another major reason I truly believe that the 296 is going to be around for a while, and I do believe it's the car to have. Just ask yourself this question. What is F1 right now? What sort of drivetrains do they operate in? Perhaps a 1.6 twin turbo V6 hybrid? Very similar ingredients. V6 hybrid, slightly larger displacement, but the same basic protocol. We also think some of the race car packages, the GT3, the Evo cars, the Challenge cars, they're all based on the 296, as they typically are in the mid-engine sports car realm. But they continue the tradition with this new 296 GTB. So they've gone and proceeded with their latest technology, certainly the packaging, and the fact that they're putting all of their race efforts into this package. They wouldn't do that with a losing proposition. And that's a big reason why I believe this car has a future. See, where a car like the SF90 was built in too many numbers, it wasn't that exclusive car like a LaFerrari. So it never hit halo car status. And while it was a big hammer, it certainly didn't necessarily slot in there well. See, because this car is much more affordable, it does put down performance numbers that are on par and equally, certainly much more fun than driving an SF90. Not that that car is anything to sneeze at. But because of the race efforts, because of the platform, you've got to know that this car has a future. Think of, okay, halo car, the F80, a pile of different electric motors, a pile of different batteries, but what's at the heart of the beast? It's a 3-liter twin-turbo V6, very much like you're finding in a 296, just like this. Granted, it's heated up, it's a little warmed over, it's got a little extra juice, but it's effectively based on the same platform of the drivetrain here. They've just stepped it up 10 notches. The F80 certainly is the halo car of today for Ferrari. When Ferrari creates a halo car, it's something that people perk up and listen, because it's usually a summary of what they've learned to date, and they've put everything that they know into aero, performance, and of course the exotic appeal. Now the F80, some loved, some didn't, but you can't dispute from a driver's perspective and a racing standpoint, there is nothing better. But I know there's a question a lot of you have been asking. What about the depreciation? What about the batteries? What about the electric motors? What about the maintenance costs? Well, we're going to talk about that. First of all, from a depreciation perspective, we've got to remember every single hybrid vehicle these days seems to be susceptible to heavy depreciation. We saw it in the SF90, we're seeing the 296, the Artura fell off a cliff. And just about every supercar that's using a hybrid drive, including the Lamborghinis, are seeing significant depreciation. Now, numbers that we haven't seen before, but that's partially twofold. Number one, it's the hybrid drivetrain. It's the insecurity buyers have in what's the future. Batteries, electric motor, extra complexity, those are all valid reasons. But we know we're not going backwards. See, the reality, as much as we like the good old days, and we all do, the fact is those days aren't coming back. Getting a naturally aspirated high revving V8 engine with a 6-speed manual gated gearbox, I don't think we're ever going to see that again. It's unfortunate, you know, as the world turns around and we're seeing these changes for, you know, a transition to a quieter, more relaxed, less polluting type of environment. You're going to have more and more cars that are transitioning even further and deeper down to the electrified realm. Now, that being said, we know Ferrari has just released an electrified car. But like many others before it, Lamborghini put that on the shelf, so did Porsche. And it's clear the writing on the wall for people that are looking for enthusiast vehicles like Ferraris, McLarens, Lamborghinis, and Porsches. They want something that sounds like something. They want to hear the engine. They want to feel the vibration. And that's a reality. And this car deals that in spades. This is one of the best sounding supercars today on the market. Even though it's turbocharged, even though it's a V6, some call it, because it's a Piccolo V12, the baby V12, as some people kind of alluded to, call it whatever you want, but don't call me late for dinner, and it certainly does sound better than the V8 cars before it. Now, that being said, of course, more and more people tend to be investing in some of the older cars, and we're watching some of the older cars go up in value. Even 458s are starting to climb. Those cars, 458s, we think the 430s with the gated cars are all going up. But where sometimes you give up on, you know, some of the old school. I mean, think of the cars that are out there. A lot of the F1, 360 F1s, the 355s, the 430s that use the older style roboticized gearbox. Those were bad gearboxes. I mean, almost every manufacturer did something like that, and they weren't amazing. The dual clutch gearboxes now are much faster and more reliable. That being said, try to fix them at home. It's definitely not a hands-on type of car, but these cars definitely do bring the performance and the abilities to an entirely new level. So every manufacturer is creating something very compelling. But one thing to consider is a lot of these older cars are going up in value. And so that's fine until you start considering what people are paying for some of these older classics, almost to the point where you can buy brand new cars. And see, that herein lies the point. A lot of people are looking brand new. You're always going to lose money on a brand new vehicle. It doesn't matter if it's a new Honda, a new Toyota, a new Ford, Chevy, or a Ferrari or Lambo. They're all going to lose money initially out of the box. The real question is, what sort of value do you get from that car along the life of the vehicle? And how much will they actually depreciate? See, from what I see today, the 296 brand new is seeing a significant amount of depreciation. Some people are saying as much as, $80,000, $100,000 in the first couple of years. But when you really look back in history, almost every one of their manufactured cars, other than maybe the F8, that one sort of dipped and then it sort of held steady. But a big reason for that, in my own personal opinion, was because that was the end of the line. The end of the line for the V8 with no hybrid. And then people start to panic. They saw the 296 show up at the door, and some people started getting nervous. They quickly knee-jerk, went out and bought themselves an F8, started paying more, driving prices up, and herein lies the value of those cars. But watching the forums, and I've been watching for quite some time, it becomes very clear. Those people that own numerous Ferraris and those that have owned these cars almost through many different generations realize that actually when you put rubber to the road, you take the car out for a drive, there's no doubt that the 296 brings the driving experience to a whole new level. You then consider, do I buy a used 296? Because now, the way it stands, there's actually a significant inventory on the market. Used car market. That's not something typically you'd seen in the past. But again, higher production numbers, the fact that a lot of people are choosing to backdate and buying older cars, like the 458s or the 430s. Let's also not forget that we're going through this weird transition period where hybrid or electric cars are taking more of the much bigger part of the market. But also, it feels as well like economy isn't quite where it was, say, 5 or 10 years ago. That's right. People are now keeping their money closer to them, maybe investments, maybe starting a business, and keeping the money a little closer, just for a rainy day. But those that are out buying will quickly realize the gem that a 296 is and what it represents. It represents one of the best driving experiences. It sounds, you hear the sound. They've got that plumbing that plumbs the sound actually from the engine into the cabin. So you can hear that sound. It's piped right in here. The Speciale version of this takes an extra tube in there and actually brings even more engine sound into the cabin. It's hilarious because you get this popping and banging and clunking and noises that you hear that are very mechanical and very engaging. The turbo noises, the blow-off valve sounds you get when you're whistling, you're lifting off throttle, your hard acceleration, lift off throttle, and some of the sounds you get from this car are absolutely mesmerizing. The sheer acceleration is on par with the Bugatti Veyron. Now you think about the perspective. You think the fact that the gap between hypercar and supercar was pretty much closed with the 296. Sure, now the Lamborghini Temerario is a couple of years later. It has showed up too. It's also a hybrid. And unfortunately, it's no longer carrying on the torch of the best sounding engines. The V10s from the Gallardo and the Huracans were some of the best sounding supercars on the market, not to mention the V12s. Currently right now, the Revuelto is the car that has that sound going for it. But if you want the lower end Lamborghini, the sounds do sound amazing, but it's not quite what they were back in Huracan days. So if you're looking for a car wrapped in heritage, it's tightly associated with their racing efforts. GT3, Challenge Series. Of course, as well, their Halo cars are very loosely based on these types of setups as well. The Ferrari has all this. It checks all of the boxes in the 296. And I truly can't imagine in today's day, in 2026, looking down at that list of different supercars in this price range, a car that I'd rather buy. The 296 delivers the performance, the sound, the heritage, and the excitement that you could possibly imagine out of a supercar. And it does it in spades. Great technology. Not everybody necessarily loves the haptics and the capacitive controls, but boy, when they are turned off, that clean, dark look, everything looks so fresh. And you know what? The modern updates have made them a lot more reliable. Initial early generations meant that they were glitchy. You had to hit a couple times or they'd go to sleep. They're actually far more functional today. They don't need a whole lot of keystrokes. They work quite well. And so while some people are asking for the good old-fashioned push button, I definitely would greenlight that. I mean, to get a nice red push button from back in the generation, put it over here somewhere, a hard button, that would be a welcome addition. But outside of a few little minor inconveniences or issues that have deviated from the traditional Ferrari, the overall packaging of this car is really second to none. And in 2026, I can't think of a better supercar to buy. You could either backdate, go buy yourself an older used 458 with 35,000 miles on it for the same amount of money as an early 2022 296 with 5,000 miles on it. We're talking about a car with 560 horsepower versus a car with 830 horsepower. Modern tech, better, more precise handling. Maybe not as sounds as good, but the 296 is definitely the supercar of this year. Definitely give it a look. If you're thinking about getting yourself a new exotic and you're definitely got a hole in your pocket, just burned away from all that cash that you see pouring on the ground, this in fact might be your choice. And with all of that said, if you're looking as well to get a little more detail about this car, check out right there. You're gonna love those videos over on 6 Speed Reviews, where I do a much more comprehensive deep dive into the 296. Hope to see each and every one of you real soon. Have a wonderful day, everybody, and a great holiday, and keep it safe. Talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.